are all, they have an adipose, it's a study group. So fishermen would release this if they caught it, thinking it's a wild fish. We get a percentage of them this way, so we can see what the mortality is from fishing.
When I first heard that they were shutting down the hatcheries, I assumed that the returning fish would be allowed to spawn naturally. That's not the case. Fish are now entering the killing tub. The lid's placed on, and the current will be applied. This herd to stop in the tub. Now bear in mind in this picture, all the fish are non-separated. The so-called wild and Chinook and the coho, a hatchery are all put in the electrocution tub together. Then the purpose for cutting the heads off merely to kill them?
No, they're already dead at this point.
They're sorting through the tub and taking out some fish, and the one they're checking right there now qualifies for a wild salmon. It's been electrocuted, and it's going to be put in the pipe to be sent down the tube to go back to the river to spawn, and landed there there it is in the bottom in the pond. There it is in the bottom of the not the pond, it's actually a part of the river. Fins were clipped. How you guys would tell the difference here today, how you'd know which ones to chop the heads off and which ones to send back to the river.
It's a good thing they're clipped. I gotta go. I'll be back.
Thank you. The last day of October 1999, and I'm up at the Fall Creek Hatchery. There's no one here, and it's my first trip here. I've never been here, don't know a thing about it, but I just found out what stops the fish from coming up the river, up Fall Creek, and it's that thing right there. Below there, you'll notice there's all kinds of salmon in the water. It's full of fish in here, but they can't get up the stream to spawn. This thing is called a weir, I guess, and what I'm seeing is that if they're going to stop the hatchery fish from going by this point, there's no one here to let the non-fin-clipped fish by. There's no way they can get by on their own. This is an impassable barricade they've put in here to keep the fish from going upstream.
Chair recognizes Senator Dukes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Were all the fish that were caught fin-clipped?
Yes, Senator Dukes. At that site, at Fall Creek Hatchery, there's a weir, like a small dam, and we passed the wild fish on up above that weir to spawn in the upper portion of Fall Creek, and actually late in the season, some of the late returning hatchery fish pass along with them. So there is a proportion of hatchery fish spawning up there in the habitat along with a fairly high proportion of wild fish, of unmarked fish.
Do they sit in the weir for some of them for a week?
The unmarked fish are sorted at the weir and passed as they arrive.
Senator Turner.
Let me clarify one thing. You indicated that the fishermen could not catch these fish in the Alsea tributary?
That is correct.
And
you could catch the Chinook run. You could catch Chinook, but the coho, you had to release all coho.
And this included releasing the fin-clipped coho or the hatchery
all
fish?
All fish. All coho fish.
Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Cruz, did you have a question? You seem to be agonizing over there a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agonize over a lot of this stuff because, you know, I'm kind of a linear person, and so much of this stuff is circular that it really confuses me. And just a comment, you know, the fact that we identify different strains of fish on the chromosomal level has bothered me ever since we started doing that. But from what you were talking about on the film, I almost got the impression that the line of logic they're using is if we eliminate all of the fish, then we eliminate the predation problem.
That's basically, that came out of a meeting last night also, is they feel that by eliminating the hatchery run, it's perpetuating It's perpetuating the seals that we have. And in that system, in my write-up, I had 400 seals. Last night, the district biologist said there's closer to 600 seals in that bay. And they asked him how many wild fish that they could identify that they thought was, and they're not even sure about that because there's like 90 years or 80 or 90 years of hatcheries in that system, so there's cross-inbreeding and whatever else all the way through it. But with the 600 seals they have out there, he said there was only like 108 fish returned. Now that's like 6 seals per every fish. And to eliminate 6,000 fish in order to get down to the 108 and say these are what's going to build this runs back, I don't know. I can't. It's not something that I can believe, and certainly they said it wouldn't be in my lifetime. So.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
That's certainly an interesting approach to the pinniped predation problem, and based on that logic, Mr. Chair, I think I'm going to draft a priority bill to limit rainfall in Oregon so we don't have to deal with floods anymore.
Are we restricted by national marine fisheries? That's why the sports fishermen aren't allowed to take them, or is that a state agency decision?
The ocean closures, sport and commercial, were dictated by the National Marine Fisheries Service. The in-river restrictions were ones we developed hoping to gain National Marine Fisheries Service approval that they wouldn't essentially take over the operation of the facilities and dictate facility closures. And in that regard, so far, we've been successful.
Some of us have been fighting for years to try to keep coastal hatcheries open. If I understood your answer to Senator Tarnow correctly, you said we're trying to protect the wild fish. And what you were trying to protect them from, in response to his question, was from interaction with hatchery fish. If I understand all of this correctly, we have been fighting for years to put state dollars into coastal hatcheries to produce fish that you now don't want us to be able to catch. And you, in fact, want to, it's hard for me because some of those fish, if I understood it all correctly, are going to probably bioproducts in Warrenton, and I represent them too. But it's hard for me to understand that we're putting thousands and thousands of dollars into fish hatcheries so that we can get cat food.
Senator Dukes, of course, we do want people to catch these hatchery fish, and indeed, if we can't figure out ways they can catch most of them, there's really no reason to run these hatcheries. We might as well close the doors if we can't solve that problem.
Chair, I would suggest that I don't think we have to wait for National Marine Fisheries to shut them down. I think we're going to do a really good job from the agency.
Please. I will remind the audience not to express itself with demonstrations.
Mr. Chair, follow up if I may. One, Doug, last year the coquille fishermen were also denied the opportunity to catch fin-clipped coho. And how do you explain the rationale of allowing a fin-clipped hatchery fish to intermingle with a wild fish, and how does that relate to the wild fish policy?
The wild fish policy doesn't set any specific standards for fisheries where wild and hatchery fish are intermingled, though clearly common sense tells us that in a case like this we're trying to protect the hatchery fish, and the wild fish, and that's why we mark the hatchery fish. So we can have fisheries where you keep the hatchery fish and you let the wild fish go so the fishery doesn't have as big an effect on the wild.
Did you notify local sport fishing groups that this was something you were considering doing?
Went through a fairly extensive public advisory committee, public meeting, and public review process in 1997 when the decision was made, Senator.
But did you notify the local sports fishing groups that this was something you were considering, this public process was ongoing?
At the time that issue was under consideration, yes. There was a fairly wide mailing out to local groups and to concerned individuals that had expressed interest to us.
Now, by government doing this, government is manufacturing a crisis. The Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife is, in fact, ensuring that there will always be endangered fish in that river and will thus be able to control property development throughout the Alsea area, particularly along the Alsea River. Exactly. The whole situation is absolutely government gone awry. It's the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing, of, again, manufacturing a crisis, and government exerting control and making sure that it keeps.
What you saw here on the videotape is not new. I mean, and this has been coming down the track for a while. But in 1994, the tribe had to go to court to protect Imnaha Spring Chinook from being killed. There were some 350 Chinook that were going to be killed, and these were proposed for listing. In 1998, we had to go to court to protect Imnaha steelhead, some 700 fish that were returning, and these fish were one generation removed from the wild.
Mr. Chair, Representative Leonard, just so I can understand exactly what you just said, you went to court to prevent ODF&W from doing what we observed on the tape.
Correct.
I see.
So we produce these fish, and they result in two things. One is natural production. We want them to return and spawn in the rivers. Harvest opportunities for everybody. And in this case, those fish that were being killed would rather be spawning in the river. Right now we have what's called a concrete-to-concrete management system, where they are reared in the concrete, they go out into the ocean, and they return to the concrete, and perhaps sometimes go to the dump. What we're trying to develop here is concrete to gravel, the best that we can. These fish, right now, with all of the mortalities that are occurring on them, we need to provide them a boost. The work that we're doing in habitat is going to take 50 years before we see some very measurable results in the habitat work we're doing. And I think that's one of the things that I would like to, I guess, wrap up with, is that the wild fish policy of the state of Oregon needs to be revisited.
Be a good little video when you have like a bank. Yeah, people riled up and stuff like pretty cool. That's an insult. Now, this time, hey Bob, you check the side one too. You think you don't want to get
See quite a few no-fin cohos in here. There's a big Chinook. These pictures were recorded on November 15th, 1999 at the Fall Creek Hatchery at their trap site in preparation to the killing of the fish. I believe that tank there probably contains the solution. That tank is the tank where they, in the center, where they electrocute the fish. We don't know officially, but it appears that blue device is the one that elevates them out of the ponds up to here, and I think that tub has the probably the killing unit agent in it, and that top pipe right over there returns to the creek. So any fish not killed that would be allowed to go upstream would be placed in that pipe, and the ones that were dispatched would go into here and into these tubs. We believe at this point, after looking, that that device there provides electrical current, and that tank probably has a saline solution in it. The fish would go in there and be electrocuted and then taken out. rather than baseball bats. At this point, we're using these removable screens to herd the fish up here to this elevator.
Hey, Bob? Is there one of the emails over here? Okay. Tell you what, take that one out, slip it in this slot here.
Be advised that the time is 8:23. That's daylight savings time, and the camera still registers, or standard. The camera registered daylight savings time, and we're on standard time, so it's an hour off from actual time. I just wondered if anybody had said the Chinook. I understand the Chinook are all hatched.
Excuse me?
I understood the Chinook eggs were saved and hatched.
We haven't had a Chinook program here for 3 or 4 years.
So that they will go to other hatcheries. All these eggs will become bait. Is that the,
I don't know. I don't know the
well,
details.
the past history it was that way. I understand last year. I wasn't here last year.
Let's see. Last year on the Chinook, we took a few for research. OSU had some folks come out and take some eggs.
Bob,
Yeah.
can you grab that tube and pour it back across that other one there?
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to know if any of the eggs were going to be hatched.
Again, I don't have any information on that as far as what the disposition of the eggs is.
What do they do with the male fish, the sperm?
Again,
So your job is to kill them and
My job is-
pull the eggs out of them?
at this point, I'm not sure what will become of the eggs, whether they're left in the fish or whether they're cut open. I don't know. Honestly, don't know. I'm not trying to keep anything from you.
I understand. You've been.
don't know.
We know that you've not tried to keep anything from me. Okay. I just was curious as to whether or not you knew what they were going to do with the eggs.
Haven't a clue.
Okay.
At this point, I honestly don't know.
Who do you take orders? Was curious as to whether or not you knew what they were going to do with the eggs.
Haven't a clue.
Okay.
At this point, I honestly don't know.
Who do you take orders from Bob Buckman?
I take orders from my supervisor, who's Tim in the pond.
Oh.
He gets his orders naturally from his boss, Dave Rogers, who's the regional hatchery coordinator for the southern end, which is this area.
Okay.
He gets his direction from Fish Division, Doug DeHart, Trent Stickle. Those folks, chain of command kind of thing. But no, we don't take
What's
orders
Bob Buckman's official capacity in this particular operation?
That I don't know. He makes recommendations to Fish Division on how he would like to see this watershed managed. They take the information that he gives them and make a decision, and then decide on policy.
Yeah, we've always said, we heard last year when Ron Yock had asked some questions, he referred to Bob Buckman.
Because Bob Buckman is the one that made the initial proposal. He didn't make the final decision. The final decision was actually made by the Fish and Wildlife Commission. But he made the proposal, which went to Fish Division. They brought it to the commission, and the decision was made.
Okay.
But we were told that if we had any questions regarding this and why those decisions were made, we were supposed to have those questions directed to Bob Buckman.
That's why that his name was out
That's
there.
why his name was out there.
Not that he was actually a decision maker as much
No.
as just he was
He was making the recommendations, yeah.
And maybe PR, huh? if there was such a thing. But he dealt with...
gone to hell in a handbasket, hasn't he?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, he's not too popular. As you just heard, or I hoped you heard, you talked to that fellow back there, he said that there's no plans to save any of the eggs from the Chinook or the cohos. So it appears at this point that all these fish that have returned here will not be allowed to spawn, other than the ones with that have all their fins. They say they will be allowed to pass on out the pipe into the stream and be held a few days out there before they can allow them to go up over the dam up above.
Watch your head.
So it's going to be interesting to see what becomes of the eggs of all of these. Last year they sold them. This year there's no talk about that. Looks to me like we're just simply killing for the sake of killing. And my honest feeling is that these employees are not liking it too well. Just they haven't come out and said anything. It's just been their general body language, I guess, so to speak. I don't know why I keep being reminded these things in here to be killed, kind of like heading the Jews for the shower. And this is probably the closest thing to fish ethnic cleansing I've ever seen. Senseless killing. And the biggest part is that they're preventing any of these fish from, the majority of them, a very small percentage can return to lay eggs. There's ample room for it. So if we don't have a Chinook program here at the hatchery, that means that all the Chinook are killed and their eggs are destroyed. That's what it means. That's what I interpret it. If I am wrong, somebody better come and tell me. But so far that he says there's no plans to do anything with the eggs from the Chinook or the fin-clipped coho. Well, anyway, if there were plans, he didn't know about them. He wasn't aware of what they were going to do with them. The end of the pipe that comes from the hatchery, or the killing shed, out this way, that one up above there, I don't know where it goes. But anyway, the fish would come shooting out here. The ones that were allowed to spawn naturally, so-called wild fish, would come out this pipe, hit the water out there, and then be able to go on upstream in this manner and on around over to the dam, where they would have to go up another fish ladder in order to go on up Fall Creek. I asked the fellow just a minute ago what the employee here, where would these fish be allowed to go up, and they have to open up the fish ladder. He says, yes, fish ladder is closed at this time because we don't have enough water to run everything. The hatchery and this operation's here, so we had to shut that down. And I'm just looking over there between this stream, this part of the stream is divided here, and the main stream over there. It looks like there's quite a bit of water going over the dam that could otherwise be used to go down the fish ladder. So I'm a little wondering at this point is, if there's that much water going over the dam, why you would have to restrict it for the fish ladder for the fish to go on up. These fish have already been detained here for at least around 2 weeks before this morning, before they were allowed to even be processed through this stressful ordeal here. So the ones that they are going to allow to go on upstream is very small compared to the total number of fish that came up the river. And
according to testimony we heard in February, that the fish, wild fish, or the non-fin clipped ones were only detained a very short period of time and allowed to pass right on through, and that all the Chinook eggs were being saved, and that's not what we heard this morning. Okay, we're getting ready to pen them all up, run them all into the elevator. Just like the Germans did. Just like Auschwitz. Complete annihilation of the species. Yep. Two other individuals just showed up here, and I don't know who they are, but we'll take their pictures anyway.
Yeah, we got you.
The audio portion of this tape was not used in evidence in the federal court in Eugene,
where they electrocuted.
And the voice you hear is that of narrating this is Dale Hazlett. That is myself. I took the pictures of Alsea River Cable TV.
Somebody said something one day in my life that they're treating this lady like property. She's a daughter of, or a wife of, he has a name, doesn't he?
And the opinions expressed by myself are my opinions.
The whole operation looks to me like it costs a lot of money. We got a lot of people here to kill fish, produce nothing. There's a master plan if you're going to have that many people involved and you don't get anything out of it except dead fish. You're not going to hatch the eggs.
And also the recording is
It appears that in this tub we have metal plates, one on each side, connected to wires hooked up to that high voltage device over there that produces voltage that electrocutes the fish when they come down that chute out of this elevator where they are presently waiting in that pond. You're about to see the beginning of the process that terminates a species, right by people paid to hatch fish. See, these very people's job is to create more fish, and their job today is to destroy everything that our dollars have helped build.
Not the whole thing.
They run the machine, and the first fish should be coming up the pipe here pretty quick. I haven't yet seen any sign of any egg containers, so there's no intent to save any of these eggs at this time that we're seeing at least. Fish are now entering the killing tub. The lid's placed on, and the current will be applied. There's people in the way. I can stand up there and get his spot there. production has appeared to stop in the tub. Now, I don't see them separating the ones out with clip fin, or with all the fins.
Do you know what streams they're putting these in? Is it all over the place? Or all down to the
Okay. Not when I got here. Will those fish recover from that? That's bullshit. No tag. There it is in the stream, upside down. I don't see any gill action. It was electrocuted, sent back to go spawn naturally, and I think that fish is dead. I don't believe it'll ever recover. That does not have a wire tag in its snout, nor does it have any signs of being anything other than a wild fish. I think if we're going to come down in here and take every fish and try to bring it back to life in the stream, it's going to be a pretty lengthy process.
Take a lot of employees.
It'll take a lot more people than they got here today. Pretty sad state of affairs we've got this whole system is, I'll tell you that. There's a Chinook going in that tub over there now. You gonna dig the snouts, the heads out later for tags?
These are all these scouts we're taking over here. These are not tags. We're taking the heads off so they can be identified.
These have tags in them?
No, they do not.
Then the purpose for cutting the heads off merely to kill them?
No, they're already dead at this point. The purpose of taking the head off is so they can be identified as hatchery fish that are planted out in the river and not naturally returning.
Yeah, well, what's in the head that identifies them?
There's nothing in the head that identifies you. There's a fin clip that identifies them as a head.
Yes, we understand that. I thought you were cutting the heads off to save the identification tags.
We are over here.
Okay, I just didn't understand why you were cutting the heads off.
These are all going to be placed back in stream beds. And when they do their surveys, they want to be able to tell that these came from the hatchery rather than naturally spawning and dying in the stream. So we're cutting the heads off, and you see one with the head cut off.
Oh, it's a marking to see that the heads were cut off in the hatchery.
Right, that's the purpose. That's the only purpose of cutting the heads off, is to tell us they came from the hatchery.
You wouldn't
This is for stream enhancement.
This fellow is talking to KVAL TV on the phone right now. They were supposed to be here taking pictures.
About these fish?
Yes. How these when these eggs were hatched, when they were put in the hatchery, these were hatchery fish. We're seeing killed. Where did these eggs come from?
They came from this hatchery.
Hatcheries don't make eggs. Excuse me. Where did the eggs come from? What fish were they taken from?
Fish that were spawned in this hatchery.
Fish that came up the Alsea River.
Yes.
Yes. So they were taken out of the river. Were those hatchery fish from a previous
Let's
hatchery?
put it this way.
Were they fin clipped or not?
Let's put it this way. These fish are the progeny of a stock that was begun in this hatchery or began being used as brood stock in this hatchery 50 years ago. Now in that time, those fish have not been wild, you know, in the true sense of the word. And in that time, they become less and less productive, and for the same reasons we talked about before.
Somehow or another, I have a hard time understanding what you said, because they become less productive and they are less wild. The fish that we call wild that are being returned today, or that have all their fins and all that, were fish that were never in a hatchery, is what I'm hearing you say, or never hatched inside of a confined area, or the protection of a hatchery. How did these fish differ from those? Because the eggs came out of the river to start with. See, that's where I got this, I guess you call it a mindset, but I have a mindset that if they came out of the river to start with, and they were hatched in a protected...
fish is a fish.
They were hatched in a protective environment. That's all a hatchery is, basically, and it helps feed them. But they are then released after they...
Years ago, we probably couldn't have told the difference, and even now it's not very easy, but we have genetic testing now that allows us to tell the difference.
Mr. DeHart said all that last February. I've listened to every word he said 100 times. Last year, they killed 6,000 there at the hatchery of the returning hatchery fish. Know that they were a hatchery fish, apart from you're sending some down to the river that have their fins, and some are killed. The majority being killed. The ones that go back to the river are the smallest portion of what's being handled here today. A very small percentage that I've noticed is going back to the river. The majority of them is being killed. So if we're going to rebuild our fish runs on such a small portion of what's being processed here today, it looks to me like a tremendously long period of time, and that the hatchery program was, according to what I'm seeing here, would be deemed as a total failure. That you got to kill anything that came out of a hatchery and send it back to stream restoration, or feed, or enrichment, or whatever you call it. But I just want to know, if its fins weren't clipped, how you guys would tell the difference here today, how you'd know which ones to chop the heads off and which ones to send back to the river.
Yeah, it's a good thing they're clipped. I gotta go. I'll be back.
Thank you.
Down there, it was killing fish. He pulled the fish out of the electrocution pond, and basically he said they was dead at that point. Now I'd kind of like to wonder how come they're putting them back in the ones that they've released. Now are they basically dead already, or what?
Yeah. Let's look at the ratio. Do you happen to know, like, since you've been watching, I was talking to that fellow over there. Do you have a ratio of what was heads cut off in this tub? That it will, it totally wasted. The eggs, they can't be used for food. The eggs won't be used. Nothing. They'll just be dumped back in the river. What is the ratio of these versus the one that went down that pipe, would you say? How many did you see go down the pipe? Back to the stream?
very few.
Oh, how many approximately? 10, 15?
I would say probably about maybe 10 or 15. And they're laying down there basically dead.
Let's go down and take a look.
Sounds good.
All right, we're here where the outfall pipe is, and these here that have been electrocuted are laying in the bottoms. I don't think they're going to lay any eggs at all. And there's some that have been brought down here that bypassed the electrocution. They're swimming around. But so far, we're seeing evidence that the ones that were electrocuted are, for all intents, as we're seeing, are dead fish. And those are so-called the wild fish that we're protecting are laying in the bottom of this thing here. They don't appear to be recovering. That one was taken around the electrocution. He was not electrocuted, he was just carried over here and put in here. So far I only see 1, 2, 3, 4 that are alive in this pond right here. Maybe 5. There's none that's gone on up there. There's 2 fish that escaped the electrocution, and there is one right there, upside down, very dead. That is a so-called wild fish full of eggs, and that's as far as it's going. It's not breathing, it's upside down on the bottom.
Later that day, the Gazette-Times got some pictures of many more at the same area, and their picture was brought out on the front page of the paper.
This tub contains fin-clipped coho. And this tub is a Chinook.
$5.50.
Those fish contain those fish have the tags in it.
Female, 700, adipose. Male, 620, adipose.
You'll notice there are more fish in the stream there than was earlier.
There you have it, the wild fish. Don't they look great? I'm glad they released them.
590. Female, adipose, 700. Male, adipose.
These pictures we're about to show you here are showing the employees on the 18th removing the wild fish carcasses from the below the outfall pipe where they had collected from the previous day's killings or electrocuting.
Hi, Dale.
Hi.
Gloria, right? Each name right?
What do we...
But out of 207.
In the next series of pictures I have here, I'll show you that there was no water through the going over the fish ladder on this date. Enough, there was just a trickle and no water for the fish to swim up past the main dam. And as soon as I started taking the pictures, just as I got there and started taking the pictures, an employee opened the valve at the same time, and the fish could go up. But there had been we had seen earlier that there was no water in there. Just a little bit of water there, but none of it is dry right there where it goes. Now you watch, the water will start coming up.
Closing that valve, which will take water away from the trap. They're not moving up into the trap anyway.
Okay, the workings of this thing is then that water goes in that inlet over there. Yeah, it goes in there, and then some of it goes down in the trap, and some of it goes in the fish ladder. So you're just changing the ratio, is that what you're telling me? Between which goes to the trap and which goes to the fish ladder.
See, since yesterday, look how much more active they get. Yeah, there's some right there. What happens is the stream goes up and down, so we go to the adjustment now and put the kilo and back more downstream.
Here they come.
Right.
Some of these fish had been held so long that they were really weak. They just absolutely couldn't swim against the current, even when the water was turned on.
Tired, but as soon as he allowed more water to go through, the fish became more active, and one coho already went up just in the first minute that he opened it.
Now, these pictures that you're seeing here were not entered into evidence in the hearing in Eugene. Only the killing part was evidence, and then there was no audio portion. So you're seeing a lot more here and hearing a lot more here.
It started coming up the ladder. But prior to yesterday and today, there hasn't been enough water in this trap, in this fish ladder here, to allow the fish to go up. In the last 5 minutes, 3 fish have gone through and out through the gates here and out into the area above the dam. As you can see, there's some swirls out there on the water from where they're